this session, we're going to be talking about creating a very efficient practice. It never fails that we can find, I don't know, how many different areas do you think would qualify for inefficiencies in most practices today? It's pretty much everything you look at in terms of what we call systems. There's always room for improvement.
Sure.
Right, and part of that improvement is in being more efficient. What do you think is the most important part?
Well, why don't we talk about treatment planning, and then we'll kind of get into scheduling
Okay.
and hygiene and some of the stuff. Treatment planning is really the matrix that you look through to create a schedule, okay? I think it's important to kind of understand that, when I treatment planned, we made sure that let's say it was the first appointment for a new patient to do clinical work, we made sure to start with what they really wanted to do.
Right.
Okay. And then secondly, we made sure that instead of giving them a written financial arrangement for the whole treatment, we did kind of really just the next treatment that we're going to do. So in this particular phase. Okay, so in this particular case, we're doing what they wanted to do, the first appointment. They had a written financial policy or written financial agreement. Then we're going to schedule them. And so if you will always work on scheduling for what they want to do and make sure that they'll fit their budget and it's at a time and an hour they want, it makes treatment planning pretty easy, okay? But it's not just like you and I deciding on what they want to do.
Right.
It's involving that patient and
Right.
understanding what they want to do. So it's that coming along beside them and making sure that you're anticipating what you need to do, but what they're willing to do.
Right.
So I think treatment planning is fairly simple. Because once you consider everything leading up to it, that's pretty easy to do.
And then when the patient comes back up to the front desk and after the financial arrangements are in place and everything, the next step is scheduling. So, in a sequence, it's treatment planning and then scheduling, right? So for the person whose task it is to do the scheduling, to actually enter the appointment, what's going to be the most important thing for that person to know?
Okay, well, let's start with the fact, just kind of some facts about a blank sheet of scheduling paper. Okay?
Okay.
For example, when is the patient going to want to come in? We have the blank deal. They want to come in during peak demand times, which would be like 7 to about 9 and 3 to 5, 6, and all day Saturday. Okay, so those are very valuable times on a schedule.
Right.
Okay, and it's one thing to think that scheduling is just filling in all the blanks, but there is a method to our madness. And one is trying to guard some of those peak demand times for more, if we're talking about the doctor, for more comprehensive treatment. If we're talking about a hygienist, mainly for new patients.
Right.
Because they don't love you yet. There's not this huge trust factor. They've heard good things about you, but they're going to demand to come in at particular times of the day. So if we know that the peak demand times fill up quicker, no matter who it is, that's an easier time to fill, then really from about 10 till 3 are the times that we need to really be really intentional about it. We know the others will fill up. Okay, so that would be kind of a foundational thought about scheduling. So peak demand times.
And that's also closely associated with creating some sense of urgency.
Right.
While the patient is still in the operatory and deciding what to do. If they go to the front with that sense of urgency, then they're more likely to be accepting of one of those times that's a non-peak demand time that you have more trouble filling just by people's natural tendencies, right?
Right.
So that's a big step. And then it's also important, I think, to communicate via the treatment plan how much time you want for that appointment. in the schedule. So the scheduling coordinator, appointment coordinator, whatever you call that person, knows are they looking for a 50-minute block or a 30-minute block or a 90-minute block.
So in your software, you're going to have the ability to automatically create kind of a schedule or ruler for different treatment modalities.
Right.
So let's say we had me, and I tell them, well, I need 60 minutes to do a crown prep from start to finish. Okay. Well, then we can set that parameter in our computer so that when the hygienist marks needed treatment, it creates a treatment plan, or treatment in quadrants in a plan, and the approximate amount of time we'd need if we did a whole quadrant of it. Okay. So that's a great start. If we had multiple doctors, we could create yardsticks for each of the doctors. Maybe I took 50 minutes to do a crown prep, he took an hour and a half. It would automatically compensate. So we don't, if we use the technology properly,
right,
and we set everything up in front of actually making the appointment, the people making the appointments, it now becomes very easy. I kind of jokingly say when it comes to equipping my operatory, a 6 or 7-year-old could do that in my office. I could just say, get me a yellow tray and a tan tub, because it's systems in front of it, and they could get 2 colors in there.
Right.
Okay, so not to minimize how important your front desk is or that treatment coordinator, but if this is done properly, the amount of time that you need is not going to be a problem. It's very detailed. Now, let's say, for example, I need an hour for a crown prep, but it always takes me an hour and 5 minutes.
Yes.
And that creates a ripple effect of us running late, the next person running late, someone's upset, but I'm kind of a legend in my own mind. Then it does fall on those people at the front desk to address that issue.
Right.
Okay, either alter it in their computer, talk to the doctor, have him alter his treatment the way he does treatment so he can do it in that time, or alter the amount of time you give them so that everybody looks competent when we do it. Okay, so back to our schedule. We know that early and late are easy to fill. Okay. If you're going to have a really successful schedule, 60, 65%, about 60% of your dollar amount production needs to be in substantial cases. Now, in a dental practice, for a doctor, that would be something at or about the fee of a crown. So as an example, I'm just going to use $1,000, okay, because I can do that in my head. Okay, so every schedule has the ability to put a goal on the top right corner that I've seen in EagleSoft and Dentrix and Softin. Okay, and you can leave the dollar sign off, but you should have a goal to schedule to. Okay, so let's say it was $5,000. Okay, so 60% of that day, the dollar amount, not the amount of time, but the dollar amount needs to be in substantial cases, which would be the value of what a crown would be, about $1,000. So if it was 60%, in this particular case, it would be $3,000.
Right.
Or the equivalent of 3 crowns, or its equivalent. Like it could be 1 crown and a full mouth extraction and 8 fillings.
It's the value of the appointment.
Yes.
That needs to be in that range of $1,000. It could be 6 fillings.
Sure. Yeah. It could be an implant.
It doesn't have to be a crown.
No.
And it doesn't have to be a root canal. But if you were doing 3 crowns on somebody,
it's going to be a good day.
It's going to be a good day. And in theory, that covers all 3 of those substantial cases.
Yeah, and if we have more, we used to, back when we first started doing this I started doing it in the early 80s because I was doing it in my own office.
Right.
I had little Mylar dots I would stick on a paper schedule.
Right.
And I had a certain number of dots. And we actually had a doctor call. He said, so how's your practice going? He said, I'm doing a lot of dot dentistry, which is a good deal.
It's a good thing.
Okay, so we're going to start with an overlying matrix of we've got to get a certain number of substantial cases.
Right.
Now, before we put those on there, let me format this for you.
And ideally, you'd want to schedule those in the day first.
Yes.
Fill those up first. If you fill your day up scattered little things, it's hard to fit the bigger things in.
Yep.
Better to fill in the big things first and then put the little things around
And so this is a little bit of an alteration on block booking.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we have a blank schedule. No, we haven't put anybody in there, but there's multiple columns. Let's say there's multiple columns for a doctor. Okay, now let's say I had 2 or 3 ops I could work out of, which was the case. I had 3 ops I could work out of. I never scheduled more I didn't hop from chair to chair. So my first column was always those substantial cases and stuff I really needed to do. The second column was maybe an emergency patient, a denture adjustment, an ortho check, or something I could kind of fit in there. But I concentrated on this one column. The problem I see a lot of doctors do is if they've got 2 or 3 chairs, they start booking the chair.
Right.
I'm booking the doctor.
Right.
Okay.
Time.
And
the doctor's time.
And that one column is going to be 95% of my income.
Right.
Now, there may be somebody in that second column that ends up being a crown prep because we could work them in. But in engineering this, before we put anybody on the schedule, I want everything substantial in that first column. I want the crown preps. I want, multiple fillings, root canals, multiple extractions. Okay. In the second column, we might have a single occlusal filling. We might have a kid taking a tooth out or a denture adjustment or a try-in or something like that. But I can only be in one place at one time. And we won't get so technical that we go into doctor time and assistant time. But again, we're going to engineer the amount of time I need from start to finish for that patient, and we're going to mark it off in that book.
Right.
Okay?
Right. The key thing, though, is getting to that 60, figuring out what that 60 to 65% number is, and making that the priority.
Right, because without that, you're never going to hit a substantial goal.
And that flows back upstream as well. If you need to do 3 of those cases a day, you better be diagnosing 5
4
or
or 5.
6.
Yeah, more than 3.
Because somebody's going to say no.
Yep.
Someone's
not going to show up.
And so if you know that you need to see 9 patients to diagnose 6 of these substantial cases, because you know what your acceptance rate is, right? Then you know you got to have 9 patients. And so then you got to know, okay, how much marketing do I have to do to get those 9 patients? And see, that's how it all starts. That's how it all starts to fit together. Yes, it all fits together.
Yep. Okay, so, and I think the goal too should be, there's not going to be a production goal that you just arrive at and it's always that production goal. Okay.
Right.
Part of marketing is planning, part of treatment is planning. And I'm going to suggest that you should shoot for at least a 10% increase every year in what you do. Now, that can take several forms.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that I suggest typically that people increase their production goal is by adding a substantial case.
Right.
Just go from, if you've been doing 3, start trying to target 4.
Right.
And that's going to be a big increase.
Right, and at some point you will hit, there's only so many bricks that you can lay in a day. Okay, I mean, let's say traditionally you just can't get a patient in and out in an hour for crown. It takes you an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, so you can work on that side of it.
Right.
Can I become more efficient? And we're talking about efficient practice, but we also have to be effective.
Yes.
You can't just be efficient and then the patients don't like you. It's got to be efficient and effective. So again, as we look at this, we're limited by our clinical speed and our ability to engineer this schedule. Now, the other way to increase productivity would be that not only scheduling these substantial cases, but for you to come up with different range of treatment modalities that you can do every year. In other words, let's say you just can't do a molar root canal. Maybe you ought to try to do that. Maybe you couldn't place an implant. Learn to place implants. Maybe you don't do Invisalign or an ortho. Learn to do that. Those can be substantial cases, and I guarantee you do ortho, 90% of that is delegated, and it's still a substantial cases. But and then you look at your case presentation, your diagnosis, and your case acceptance. You can't have a substantial case unless you diagnose it and then get the patient to say yes. And so I see a lot of times either younger doctors compared to older doctors either run through more new patients than the older doc does with half the people saying yes. We finally get some competence in there, and all of a sudden we realize that, hey, we're getting a larger percentage saying yes. Now, let's get a larger percentage saying yes to a different type of treatment that has a bigger upside to it that they need.
Yes.
Not referring it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now got, we've kind of blocked off 3 or 4 of these substantial cases. In this case, it was 5,000, 3 of them. We've got a couple of them in there, and the rest of the day is kind of filling up, and we've had some emergencies we've added, and now it's a day or two before. How do we ensure that our schedule doesn't fall apart?
You talking about confirming patients?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to do that.
Okay, so
You know?
define what's confirmed. If I called and left a message, did I just confirm that appointment?
I like to start a step before that, and when the patient is making the appointment, ask them how they would like to be contacted.
Right.
Used to be 25 years ago, you called them on their phone, their home phone or their work phone. And then all the computer software started, you had two blanks. You had a blank for home phone and a blank for work phone.
Right.
Well, starting 15 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, people started carrying cell phones, but there was no place to put that number.
Right.
So you had to do that.
Right.
And now, certain people never really talk on their phone. It's called a phone, but they don't really use it as a phone. It's email or a text message. So I think that's essential, is to find out.
But having the correct number.
Having the correct
how
number.
Can I, not how you'd like. Not just how you'd like to be. Reminded. But where?
The bottom line to your original question was,
Yep.
they have to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm coming.
Right.
Whether that's in a text message or an email or a voicemail or whatever it is, they have to confirm that they're coming. So that's what you're actually confirming.
Okay.
You mentioned a couple of times emergency patients. A lot of practices have trouble with emergency patients, and it causes a lot of friction between the people at the front desk and the people in the back. The people in the back are saying bad things about the people at the front. What was she thinking? We can't possibly do that here.
Yeah.
On and on and on. Talk about that for a minute.
Okay, so emergency patients. One, remember, I've got staff that they're paid well. I picked the right staff. They got great people skills. They do their job. I created policy manuals and job descriptions. I measure their performance. There are consequences for not doing well. Okay, and again, the staff won't tolerate mediocre staff in a culture like that. Okay, so they're running it like a business. You're right. In most offices, you kind of have the front desk is against the clinical people, who is against the hygienist. It's like the hygienists by themselves, the other doctor clinical. It's like this, push and shove and pull and tug. Same-day dentistry is important. Mm-hmm. Emergency patients, being able to fit them in is huge in growing your practice. But again, it still causes a problem if you don't have a system or protocol to handle them.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm working on a patient. We have a system and protocol. And basically, an assistant is going to see them and triage them.
Okay, but even before that, you've got the phone call.
Yeah,
you've got the
how
phone call.
soon can you be here?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's how soon can you be here? If it's 9 in the morning, they can be there at 4:45.
Okay. Yep.
That's not an emergency.
Yep.
If it's 9 in the morning and they say, I'm sitting in the parking lot calling you from my cell phone, I can see the front door. In fact, I can see through the door and see you when we're talking to each other. I can be there in about 30 seconds. Then that's an emergency.
Right.
And you treat it accordingly.
Right.
If somebody can't come until 4:45, I'd probably say
not an emergency.
it's probably not an emergency. So we'll see you tomorrow at 10.
Right. When you can fit it in.
When you can fit it in. Otherwise, it's what you said. How soon can you be here? That doesn't commit you to anything. Right? That's a question. And you're asking the questions, you're controlling the conversation. How soon can you be there? Assuming that they can be there in a reasonable time, you say, great, come on in. It's a pretty busy day, but we'll work you in.
Right.
We'll take good care of you.
Now,
We'll get you out of discomfort, blah, blah, blah.
The idea is he's creating expectations for the patient.
Right.
Okay, so we don't know this person.
Yeah.
We might have found out, what their complaint is and that they're hurting or it's broken or whatever.
Right.
We're trying to limit their expectation to think that they're going to be fixed completely.
Right.
Maybe get them out of pain.
There's a difference between being seen and being treated.
Yeah, okay.
And that's where a lot of doctors go astray, is they jump right into treatment.
Right.
Without any thought about the repercussions on the rest of the schedule and the rest of the day.
Whoops, we're talking about financial arrangements again and collections and
all of that.
Yeah.
And staying on time.
Yeah, and staying on time. That is the number one complaint of patients.
Yep.
Are, there's a double standard. I show up on time, they're never on time.
And if I show up late,
I get reamed
Yep.
because, you know,
Yep.
there's this double standard.
Yep.
Okay, so
So the patient shows up, and then what?
okay, I don't even know they showed up.
Right.
Okay, I mean, it's being, I got people. I got people that handle this. Okay, so I'm working. Now, we had an office designed with a traditional Pride system with a power panel, 2 openings, chair in the center facing away from the hallway. So I'm working, and maybe an assistant would come to that other side where she could catch my eye, and she'd go, you know, and again, I'm not hopping from chair to chair, but I'll go, Candy, if you'll go ahead and get the impression, or I'll go get the impression material, you go ahead and rinse out Mrs. Jones's mouth, and I just start walking down the hallway, and you know, Michelle's going, numb number 19. Okay, now, most doctors would go, what are we doing? I mean, it's 4:30, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. Or do we have time to do this? Or they probably wouldn't even ask that. Right. I mean, can the patient afford it? They should ask that.
They should ask.
They don't. I don't even have to worry about it. I know the patient has had x-rays taken, mm-hmm. has been triaged, probably, knows and says what they want. We figured out the finances for them. Everything's kind of done, and we have time to fit it in our schedule.
Right.
Okay. And then I just numb them. But when I walk in the room, everything's set up where I see a brochure for a root canal and crown. On the screen, x-ray of the broken tooth. And maybe in the other screen, a photograph of it.
Right.
I mean, everything's set up. It's the tray setups, which I know what color it is for filling, what color it is for crown, and what it is for endo. Mm-hmm. Everything's set up. Mm-hmm. I walk in, they've already got nitrous oxide on their nose. They've already got music on their ears. And I just sit down and say, I know there's topical on. Everything's ready for me, okay? I just walk in and say, Mrs. I'm so sorry to hear about your tooth. He said, I'll get to you as quick as I can, but let's get it where it's not bothering you. And I numb them up, I leave, I finish that patient, I come right back in here and work on them. Now, or I'm walking down the hallway and she goes, prescription. And I'm thinking, we got to pay our bills. We got to work this in. We're going to make everybody late. I don't do that.
I got nothing to do tonight.
Yeah, I got nothing to do. We'll work way past that. Yeah. Okay. I know that the patient can't afford it. Mm-hmm. They don't have the right dental IQ. We don't have time to do it. Whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I'll sit down, Mrs. Jones, I'm so sorry to hear, touch her on the shoulder again, so sorry to hear, that you got this toothache. You have an abscess tooth. I understand that you'd like to fix it and try to save it. Shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to need to have you on antibiotics, and we'll get you some pain, but I'm going to need you on the antibiotics until, and Michelle goes, 10:15 on Tuesday. 10:15 on Tuesday. The exact time it would take, well, that was when we had, they had plenty of time. She spent a lot of time with them explaining what was going on. I knew that she did her job.
Right.
And that she was handing off, I hand her back, and we're back in business.
And that she wasn't just doing this because she needed to go home early.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was really the way it had to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
So good. Most offices don't do it that way.
No, I understand.
Yeah, but there would be a lot less friction and a lot less stress if they would try that.
Well, and oftentimes it comes back to scheduling. Have you never walked into an office and the guy says, well, I'm booked out 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But they're doing $40,000 a month?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm booked out for 3 days.
Right.
And we're doing, a whole bunch more
that
than
much
that.
a week.
We're doing $30,000 a day, whatever it is. So again, it's one of those things that everything revolves around this schedule. This is the hub, the matrix that everything has to operate with.
And I know another thing that you always did. You and your assistants were constantly looking at the schedule all day and making tweaks and adjustments and, deciding that, we can shave 10 minutes off here and maybe that'd be a good place for an emergency patient. Right. And, you were
real proactive
about it. And I go in office after office after office and, everybody shows up on Tuesday morning and nobody's looked at the schedule. Right. Nobody knows what to anticipate. Nobody has really thought about it. It's just, well, we'll show up and see what happens. Yeah. And that usually doesn't work well.
And huddles help that, but it goes far. I mean, huddles aren't the do and end all.
Right.
It's really just becoming like unconsciously competent at what your job is.
Right.
And we even, my daughter used to write me love messages on my mirror with a dry erase pen. Mm-hmm. Well, we had glass in our sterilization area. I mean, all the clinical staff is in there.
Right.
And they would write, 10 o'clock, Dr. Abernathy has an open appointment. I mean, they're not looking all the time at my schedule, but again, they were constantly coming up with ways and systems to make sure everybody was aware and engaged in the process and knowing that we only get this day. I mean, once the day ends, we can't fix that day. And so they were great at that. So.
Okay, so that's a lot on the doctor side of scheduling. How about on the hygiene side of scheduling?
Okay, well, it's kind of the same thing in like the basics are. They need
Right.
substantial cases too.
Right.
It's just not the value of a crown. For a hygienist, it's probably going to be new patients and scaling and root planing,
Right.
or the majority of their substantial cases. Now, I do want to mention recall and new patients just quickly,
Okay.
because, I think traditionally we pay hygienists hourly,
Yes.
which tends to get us a patient every hour.
Yes.
I don't know anybody that needs exactly 60 minutes to have their teeth cleaned, but because they're paid on the hour, they get a patient every hour. I mean, they might need 65 minutes, they might need 40, they might need, there might be somebody with an upper denture and a lower partial, only have 2 teeth in their mouth, they still have an hour.
Yep.
Okay. Now, again, to create this ownership mentality with the staff, they have to understand the business of dentistry. And scheduling is part and parcel to that. So we look at an average practice. They have, let's say, 25 to 30 new patients a month. They generally have one hygienist, one front desk, one assistant, maybe 1.5 assistants, but about 4 employees. Right. They have about 25 to 30 new patients. So
Right.
in essence, in an average practice, they generally work 4 days a week, 16 days a month. Let's say they were overachievers and had 32 new patients. They would have about 2 new patients a day per hygienist. Okay, now, again, when we start expanding and we go from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 new patients, we're adding people. The dynamic of what an average practice, we don't want to be average, okay? We want to be better than average. So that's going to be more than 30 new people. But we're going to get to the point where we have to hire a second hygienist. Well, for that to be successful, we've got to have, again, another 30 or so new patients for them to be busy too. Okay, then substantial cases.
And you might not bring that second one in full-time day one.
Right.
They might be phased in. They might work
Right.
1 or 2 days a week, and then
Right.
2 or 3 days a week, and then 3 or 4, and then eventually full-time as you've increased these new patient numbers.
Now, what Max just said is key in that you need to be competent enough and invest enough money and time and have the right people helping you that you control that new patient faucet. You can turn it up, or you can kind of let it alone and let it plateau a little bit, or you can crank it back up.
Yep.
I mean, that's key to adding another doctor. It's key to adding other offices. It's key to understanding consumerism. It's all marketing stuff. Okay. But
And maybe you do more of what you know you ought to do and ask for referrals.
yeah, and ask for referrals. That doesn't really cost anything.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times we talk about marketing, we talk about, you need to spend 3 to 5%, you need to spend this much money and stuff like that. But again, even if you market and get them in, if everything isn't right, we talk about donor and recipient practice. The donor practice, pushing the patient off, the recipient practice getting it. Again, had they spent time and effort to keep the patients you've got,
Yes.
in reactivation and recall and stuff like that, you wouldn't have to spend as much money marketing.
Well, I remember in your practice, you're getting 250, 300 new patients a month, and you were spending under 2% of the income on marketing. I mean, you're doing a lot of marketing,
Right.
but as a percentage, that number went down.
It did, as a percentage of
As
what
a
you made,
percentage.
it does go down. But also, if truly we want to have direct referrals at 50% or greater,
Yes.
and probably I'd rather have it be 60 or 70%,
Yeah.
then again, focusing in on those people that love you
Yes.
and making sure they understand that you want to see their family and friends, and then you're not too busy to see them. Okay, because if you always run behind, they just assume that you don't need anybody. Okay.
And interestingly, they may keep coming,
Yep.
but they won't tell their friends to come because they don't want to hear from their friend, why did you send me there? I had to wait 30 minutes.
Okay, well, that could be
They
the
don't
same
want
thing
that
with
kind of-
pricing too. We talk
Could
about
be.
being too expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, it could be that it's not that you charge more, but that you find more. Okay, I mean, like, you're a great doctor. I found all of this, and then you present it in a bad way.
In a lump sum.
In a lump sum. And then all of a sudden they're going, that's not working for me. And so they love you. You know, the good patients that come to you love you, but they're not sure that their friends and neighbors can afford you. Or let's say you're out of network.
Or they might want to say, I don't want my neighbor to know I spent $20,000 here.
Okay, yeah, whatever it is. Okay. But so in hygiene, same thing. You're going to find new patients want to come in peak demand times.
Right.
We've got to save time for these new patients, which would be, I would suggest at least an hour and 20 minutes, an hour 30. An hour is not long enough for an adult patient to do an adequate new patient experience.
Right.
Okay. You've got to understand too, that new patient is going to want to come in during peak demand times. So there's got to be enough time in the hygiene schedule. And then the hygiene is feeding their schedule in the future through recall. Now, if I'm talking to your hygienist, I say, hey, hygienist, do you pre-book your current patients for the recall patient for the recall when they're there? And they go, absolutely, doctor.
They all say yes.
They always say yes. And I said, like 50%, 60, 70, oh no, way over 90%. Okay, I mean, and that is the answer. I mean, it should be 90 to 100%.
They know what it should be.
Okay.
They know what
but
they
then
should
I go,
be.
then I flip through the software and I go, okay, let's look 3 or 4 months out, sometime inside of that 6-month period. And let's see what the schedule looks like. We're going to see one of two things. One, it is completely full. Is that good or bad?
Bad.
Why is it bad?
Because you're going to have ever put a new patient.
That's right. There's no place for the new patients. There's no peak demand times available for the new patient.
Right.
Okay, but what I normally see, 90% of the time, is only 3 or 4 people scheduled
Yeah.
during
Peak demand times.
8 to 9 or 10 and 3 to 5.
Yep.
Again, no place for a new patient. Right. So in one case, they were telling them the truth, but their system is flawed. The other one, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They weren't lying to me, but somebody wasn't doing their job.
Yeah.
And I say, so explain to me why I'm not seeing, oh, well, that must have been a bad week 6 months ago. So they go back and we look, as far as we look out, it looks exactly like that. So that recall reactivation is real important.
Yeah.
Hygienists paid hourly tend not to be as engaged in making sure that they make these appointments in the future. And they should be the person making it, not the front desk.
Yes, and one other point on that, that's a key point, that you're going to have a better percentage of kept appointments if the appointment is made between the patient and the hygienist rather than between the patient and the person at the front desk, right? But, and I think you said this earlier, you don't want to take all 10 patients today, take them directly to 6 months in the future, and drop them all back in that same order, so that you have a full day today and a full day exactly 6 months from today. Because like we said, you don't have room for new patients, and you don't have time, you don't have the flexibility to move somebody in a little bit, a day or two if you have an opening.
Right.
So I always suggest you move them out 6 months plus a week or two.
Yep.
And then if you need to move somebody in a day or two because of a cancellation, you've got the flexibility to do that. And if you take your 10 patients today and move them out 6 months plus a week or two, you still want to leave 30% of your day open.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to...
So you don't have to put them all on that same day in the future. You might spread them over 2 or 3 days.
Right. So we're going to pre-book 100% in the future. Try.
Everybody that's there today needs to leave with an appointment.
However, we're only going to pre-book any day in the future to 70%.
Right.
With the idea of guarding the peak demand times.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, these patients are here. They love you. They're going to be upset if they can't see you,
right,
for the most part. Okay, so we're going to pre-book 100%. What do we do with that other 30%? Well, they might go in a different column on that same day. And it'll be the patient that's not going to throw hissy fit if they don't get to see that particular hygienist. But it would mean that, let's say you had an average number of new patients, 30. That's 360 a year. Average hygienist can see about somewhere between 500 and 600 patients a year if she sees them twice a year and still sees those 30 new patients and does some scaling and replanning.
Yes.
Probably, if it's 3 times, it's probably closer to 500. But let's say it was 500 instead of 6. Okay? Every time that you pass, you're sitting there with the clicker, okay, 1, 2, 3, 500, you would need to have another hygienist. Now, you've got a practice now, and you've got hygienists now, and you've got a certain number of new patients. How often do you hit that 500 mark and you don't need a hygienist? What that tells you is your recall isn't working, you're not doing reactivation, and whoever's scheduling isn't pre-booking, or they didn't like you and they're not coming back. And so that's like a big red flag, a sucking chest wound of you need to start looking at it.
So even in a average practice,
Yep.
30 new patients a month, you should
Every year
be
and a half.
adding a hygienist every couple of years at least.
Yes.
Every couple of years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean,
Interesting.
and I rarely
Because-
see that.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of practices where they've been in practice for 15 years, they've had 2 hygienists for 13 years,
Yep.
and, for some reason it just stopped.
Yep.
At a certain point.
And 67% of all the dentistry you're ever going to do in the future is going to come out of hygiene recall, not out of new patients. What happens is it takes a while to create that trust factor, and they think you walk on water and you're just the greatest thing since chocolate. Then you get to do that. Or you've cycled them through and they've been with you so long that something breaks, or
Yes.
something a cusp breaks off and they need a crown, stuff like that. That's what if the secret to all your growth was just taking care of the people you've got? It could be. If you could get them, you get them in, you inspire them, they show up, they pay for the treatment for everybody they know, and you get them to come back and repeat and do it again and repeat and repeat. That sometimes is the secret to a great, great dental practice.
Yeah, and as a little bit of an aside, when corporate practice and the DSOs and all that started becoming more prevalent in the profession,
Right.
I was telling doctors in private practice all the time that that's going to be your key to competing against these people, is
Right.
to have such a good relationship with the patients that they won't consider going over to these other practices, and they'll still refer you good patients, and you should in fact pick up some patients from those practices.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that it's always true, but it's true a high percentage of the time that those practices are going to be donor practices.
Right.
They're going to spend more money than you can spend attracting new patients, but they're probably not going to be maybe as warm and fuzzy as your practice should be.
McKinney's one of those towns, like one of the fastest growing towns in the United States, and we got a lot of new doctors. It never bothered me we had new dentists. And this is the dirty little secret of great practices, is that we're not scared of the other guy because they're not very good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not that they're bad clinical dentists. It's just they don't think of it the way we're trying to get you to think about this. They're not your competition. Now,
Yeah.
a bass boat may be, or whatever, send your
Yeah.
kid to riding lessons, but it's not that guy down the street.
Yeah, I listened to some podcasts of a guy that owns a pet store.
Okay.
And he's a good businessman. He's a good marketer. He does a lot of good stuff
Right.
online. And, he swears up and down that when he's giving advice to other
Right.
pet store owners or potential pet store
Right.
owners, is to get as close as you can to a Petco or a PetSmart. Because they do such a horrible job. The things that they sell are the things that they can make the most money on, not necessarily the best things.
Right.
And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes away the...
It shouldn't be that hard to out-service
Right.
those businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's take a few minutes to talk about staff, teamwork, kind of, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
why don't you start? And
Well, I think, again, that's part of that competitive advantage is that oftentimes you'll see in those corporate practices or the DSO practices, there's not a lot of staff longevity.
Right.
It's also maybe not a lot of doctor longevity. So every time those patients come in, they're seeing a new face, which takes their already at some level of anxiety, probably ratchets it up a couple of notches because they don't have a relationship with these people.
Right.
They don't know these people. They don't trust these people. So that's what you got to have going. And the key to that is hiring good people and keeping good people, and so that you don't have that. And that's really a key to efficiency. It's hard to be super efficient if you've got new people in these various jobs all the time, right?
That you're having to micromanage to get them to
Yeah,
do.
because I mean, if you're always with your staff in learning mode,
Right.
they never get to really efficiency.
Right, being, unconsciously competent at what they do, where it's just natural. to do
Natural,
it.
yeah.
So we start with the fact that I think few practices have very good hiring strategies.
Yeah, they hire from desperation.
Yeah, if you put a
Really?
mirror under their nose and it fogs,
Yeah.
you're our person. They wait until they have to have it.
Yeah.
Where the real smart practices are constantly looking for a way to upgrade their team.
Yeah.
Now, that can be done one of two ways. If there's a culture of wanting to always upgrade your team understands that I have to play at the top of my level game, and I have to continue to learn and engage, or he'll find somebody who will. I mean, not that this is an adversarial deal, but the reality of business is that we've got to produce somewhere in the range of $20,000 to $25,000 per month per employee. Now let's take
Right.
that average practice, because we know what they do.
Right.
They have 3 or 4 employees.
Right.
So if they did 20, that would be $80,000 a month. Times 12 would be 900 something, wouldn't it? 900, almost $1 million. 83,000 is $1 million. Okay, yet they have 4 employees that are doing $8,000 a month per employee. None of the numbers are going to work.
Right.
So assembling that team, I mean, if you play in the NFL, there's not that many franchise players. I think the average stay is like 2 years in the NFL or something.
Yeah.
It's turnover, and it's kind of like hiring coaches for college football teams. Like, coach, we're behind 100%, win or tie. You lose, you're out of here, okay? Well, when we start trying to assemble this team, the reality begins with the policy manual and job descriptions, and where you look. Now, I have a lake behind my house. It's stocked with Florida bass. People like to come fish there because they can catch fish, because you don't have to be very good at it. Okay.
You're not really fishing there. You're just catching.
Yeah, just catch it.
You're just catching.
And then it's hard to get them off because they're big. Okay. So if I look in the right locations for people, that's great. And again, the number one quality for a staff person I'm looking for, they don't even get to be talked to unless they got incredibly great people skills and they're internally motivated. Now, way down on that list of things I'm looking for is maybe some experience. Okay. Now, again, things have changed. We used to hire assistants and we could train them ourselves, but they have to find, if they want to take X-rays or they want to do nitrous oxide or something, they've got to pass certain,
Right.
specifications. But again, there are great people out there, but where I look is different than where most people look. It's not just Craigslist. It might be letters directly to every hygienist in my area or every doctor that's in my area, because I could get off their state board. It might be some Craigslist. I love to get direct referrals from my own staff.
Right.
This esprit de corps and this culture that we created, they don't want me to mess it up by hiring the wrong person.
Right.
So in my office, and this is going to sound weird, my staff hired all the staff and got final say on all the doctors that became associates and eventual partners in mine. If they voted no, I did not hire them.
Right.
And so it's almost like, since most of us I know we have female doctors and we have male doctors, but a majority of our staffs are female. And I find that females intuitively can understand, regardless of what you look like, they can understand whether your personality, very quickly will fit into the culture that we've created and would be an asset. And the reason that they learned to do that is they understood, because from day one, that new person was going to get in line for a bonus check.
Right.
They got benefits.
Right.
And unless we could produce at least 4 times what we paid them, it was going to create a downturn in our practice.
Right.
They just understand the business, the emotional and cultural side, and they were very good at assembling that team.
And another little piece of that is they don't want to be proven wrong. They don't want to pick the wrong person.
Yeah, if they say yes.
Because they don't want to have to come back to you and say, we messed up.
Right. So
you've got to fire this person.
Yeah, and I've had doctors who, I hired an associate. I saw Sandy, one of my key hygienists. She goes, I wasn't there that day, but she came and got me after this patient left. The young doctor had gone in, had diagnosed a crown. Patient said, yes, I'd like to do the crown. Okay, they would probably have rather wanted to see me. So it wasn't like he was doing it for himself. Okay, and here's what Sandy said. She didn't like the young doctor. So she went, Mrs. Jones, let me show Dr. Abernathy your x-rays when he gets back in, and I'll give you a call if you really need that crown. Okay, so, staff that aren't committed like that will cut the legs out from under somebody. So you're right. Once they say yes, now it's their responsibility to do it. I had offices visited. One a week would come in and watch and follow around. And they said, well, do you have some videos of how you train that staff person? And I was embarrassed to tell them that no, I didn't.
You had no idea.
I have no idea how they got trained. I mean, I did. I knew the policy manual was great. I knew the job description was great, and they were constantly upgraded. I knew we took time to train them with people that were gathered around them. But in essence, I think probably if there were an assistant, one of my key assistants took him in a closet and said, "You got about 6 weeks to figure this out." Okay, I mean, really, they went. I see officers.
Yeah.
Well, I've only had her a year, and so she hasn't learned. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If she can't do that, and so it's a cultural thing,
And that brings up a good point too. And we kind of started off and touched on it.
Okay.
I mean, you should hire slowly and fire quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
Most offices flip that 180 degrees, and they hire quickly
Because they're desperate.
and then they won't fire anybody.
Right.
Because as time goes along, you develop emotional attachments, and you feel worse and worse and worse about firing somebody. I mean, it's easier to fire somebody on day 3 than month 3, and on month 3 than year 3, and it's just.
Well, and it's a limiting belief too that you can't fire.
can't.
I mean, oftentimes we've seen some of what if I told the doctor, what is your most valuable? Well, this lady at the front desk, she knows everybody knows their name. You see her stealing money. See her coming in late, leaving early, stirring the pot. And I said, you've got to get rid of her. They won't do it. A year later, after we're not even doing coaching with them, they finally let them go, and they have the best month they ever had.
Right.
Okay, so this fear
and the
holds
whole
us
rest
captive.
of the team and all the patients are saying, we were wondering why you kept that person here so long.
Yep. So the bottom line in becoming more efficient and effective in a dental practice is that there should be no stone unturned. You can't. I mean, there should be no made men. These aren't Goombas where they're mafia and they can't be touched. Okay. Every system should be looked at and re-looked at and constantly tweaked a little bit. It's not going to be a big tweak. I don't think we go into offices and say, you're doing it black, we need to make it white. It's not a huge deal. It may be 100 little things to get a better response, but it's not usually something so horrible. Well, we did have one guy that never unlocked his front door. But other than that, it was, it's like constantly tweaking these things. Whether it's your schedule or your hygienist or communications with your patients or staff teamwork or motivation. I will say that I have doctors misuse the word motivation a lot.
Yeah.
They say, how do I motivate my staff?
Right.
And that Vince Lombardi quote where he was asked right after winning the Super Bowl, the guy's going, oh, coach, how do you motivate your staff? And he's at the very back of the room, and probably NBC, CBS, whatever the big ones in front were, he still's got his hat on, and he's going, who was that said that? And you watch the video, and and the guy goes, sir, I did. He says, how do you motivate your players? He says, my job is not motivating my players. My job is to keep 11 motivated players on the field. And he took his hat out and put it, you understand that? And he got so upset he left. He wouldn't even answer
any more questions.
Your job is not motivating your staff. Now, bonuses will not motivate your staff. They'll incentivize them. Mm-hmm. It creates a business plan that it's a win for them, but they come through the door motivated, wanting to learn, and willing to do whatever it takes, or they don't. again, it's so important that people skills, motivation, because those are the only two things you cannot train. I can teach anybody to suck spit.
And teamwork and getting along with the rest of the people on the team.
Yeah.
You know, that's a key thing as well. You know, and I tell people, you know, just a little thing that I've picked up through the years is that if you're interviewing people for these staff positions, whether it's the staff interviewing them or the doctor interviewing them, if you can, let's say you've got 3 candidates and they're all pretty much equally qualified, and you know, you think, well, I might be happy with either one of them. But if one of them has been on a fairly successful sports team, you know, that's a positive. I'd lean in that direction. If they had a father or a husband who owned their own business, that realizes, you know, if we don't work, we don't eat.
Yeah, there's up and down economies.
That's a different work ethic and a different state of mind. So that would get a positive point.
Yeah.
You know, maybe even as something as simple as singing in a choir or being in the band.
Right.
It doesn't have to be sports related, but something like that. They're usually going to they're going to understand teamwork a little bit better.
Well, the scary part is having an employee that this is the first place they've ever worked in.
Yes.
Whether it be a doctor, or an assistant, a hygienist, that's just a bad deal.
So we've covered quite a few areas of practice where you can tweak, fine-tune, maybe even make a major change to be more efficient and more effective.